Something shifted that day in the laundry room, and what started as a quiet moment of routine left me questioning everything I thought I knew. Please, don't make the same mistake I did. I'm 53 years old. My name is Rachel Anderson, and for most of my life, I believed I had everything figured out. I married young, stayed home to raise my son, kept the house in order, and convinced myself that love, real love, was something I'd already experienced, and that what came after was just maintenance. I was practical, careful, maybe a little too proud of how well I kept things in line. I believed in boundaries, in roles, in doing what was expected. But lately, I've been questioning everything. And what happened that afternoon in the laundry room? Well, it changed something in me. Something I never thought could change. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. It all started on a quiet Tuesday, one of those gray, windless days when everything feels still, like the world's holding its breath. I was in the laundry room, which honestly had become my little sanctuary. I'd lit one of my favorite candles, vanilla and cedar, and had some soft jazz playing low on the kitchen radio. Folding clothes is one of those chores that lets your mind wander, and mine often does. I had just finished folding one of Jake's T-shirts. My son, 27 years old now, home for a week while his apartment building dealt with a water leak. He's taller than I remember him being when he left for college, more filled out in the shoulders. His voice has that deeper register now, something calm and grounded about it. But to me, he'll always be my boy. My little tornado of scraped knees and Lego forts. I was humming along to the music when I heard the floor creak behind me. I turned slightly, expecting him to walk past or ask about dinner plans, but he didn't speak right away. Instead, he stood there in the doorway, watching me. His presence caught me off guard, not because he startled me, but because of something in the way he was looking. It wasn't a stare. Not quite. Just intent, focused, like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite get it out. "Hey," I said with a small smile, holding up a pair of his socks. Still can't figure out how a grown man loses so many of these. He chuckled, stepping into the room. "I swear the dryer eats them. Some secret sock portal." I laughed, shaking my head. "Well, I've been folding your clothes since you were in onesies. I think I would have found that portal by now." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me work. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it held weight, the kind of silence that presses gently against your chest. "You always smell like fresh laundry and cinnamon," he said out of nowhere. I paused mid-fold. "That's an odd thing to say." "No, it's not," he replied, his voice softer now. "It's just true." I didn't look at him right away. I focused on smoothing the edges of a towel, setting it into the basket, trying to keep my hands busy while my thoughts suddenly spun in 100 directions. Something about the way he said it felt too personal, too close. Or maybe I just never noticed how deeply he observed me. "I missed this," he said. "Just being home, hearing your voice in the next room. The smell of this place." That last word came out a little quieter, like it wasn't meant to be said aloud. My stomach gave a tiny flutter, guilt, nervousness. I wasn't sure, but I turned to him fully then, trying to anchor us back in normalcy. "You know, you're always welcome here, Jake," I said gently. He nodded, his gaze not leaving mine. "I know. I guess I see things differently now." The dryer buzzed loudly, breaking the tension like a snapped string. I blinked and turned away, grateful for the excuse. I opened the door, reached in, letting the warm air spill out. But as I did, I felt him step a little closer behind me. Not touching me, just closer. "Mom," he said quietly, and I froze at how carefully he said it. "Can I tell you something without you freaking out?" My heart pounded. That depends. Are you about to tell me you've joined a cult or you're moving to Alaska? He gave a soft laugh. Neither. I turned halfway toward him, and for the first time, I noticed how much older he looked in his eyes. Not in a tired way, but in a way that held stories I hadn't heard, thoughts he hadn't shared, and something else. A vulnerability I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager. What is it? I asked. He hesitated. I think you're incredible. I don't say it enough. You've always held everything together, even when things were hard. I felt the breath catch in my throat. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like they'd been building for years, layered with quiet admiration, and something else that made my skin tingle, made my heart ache. I smiled, placing my hand on his cheek like I used to when he was little. You're a good man, Jake. He closed his eyes briefly, leaning into the touch. I don't know what I am sometimes, but I know this. Being here with you feels more right than anything's felt in a long time. The moment stretched between us. Silent, fragile, and charged with something neither of us dared to name. And in that quiet, I felt something in me shift. It was the beginning of something I couldn't explain yet. A thread pulled loose in the tightly woven fabric of my world. I didn't know where it would lead. I only knew this: I wasn't folding laundry anymore. I was unfolding something much deeper. The next morning, I tried to move through my routine as if nothing had happened. The sky was clear, birds chirping outside the kitchen window, and the coffee machine hissed with familiar comfort. But something in the air had changed. Or maybe it was just me. Jake had gone out for a morning jog, something he always did when he needed to think. I was glad for the space. Not because I regretted anything from the night before, but because I needed to sit with the weight of it all, to figure out how to breathe through this strange new awareness I hadn't asked for. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, staring into my coffee cup like it held answers. I kept hearing his voice from yesterday. Being here with you feels more right than anything's felt in a long time. There was a tenderness in his tone that had replayed in my mind all night. Not inappropriate, not overt, but deep, emotional. And maybe that's what made it so powerful. It wasn't about rules being crossed. It was about feelings that had been quietly waiting for a moment to be seen. By noon, he was back, sweaty, breathless, his t-shirt sticking to him. I looked up from chopping vegetables for lunch and smiled without thinking. You ran long, I said. Had a lot to work out in my head, he replied, grabbing a towel from the counter. I went back to slicing cucumbers, keeping my eyes on the cutting board. Did it help? There was a pause. I don't know yet. He grabbed a glass of water, his movements a little slower, more deliberate than usual. When he finally spoke again, his voice was low and steady. Can I ask you something, Mom? And I mean this as a real question, not something to make things weird. I set the knife down carefully. All right. Do you ever feel like the life you built, the one you thought you were supposed to have, didn't really turn out to be yours? I blinked. Of all the things I expected, that wasn't it. Yes, I said softly. More times than I care to admit. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. There was no tension in his shoulders, just honesty, and it disarmed me. I used to think you were the strongest person I knew, he continued. You held this house together, took care of me, kept everything running. But I also saw how quiet you got after Dad left, like part of you was gone, and you just kept moving anyway. I looked down at my hands. They'd aged without me noticing. Lines where there used to be smoothness, veins more visible, but they were still strong, still capable, still mine. I had to keep moving, I said. You were watching. I couldn't afford to fall apart. He nodded slowly. But you did. I saw it. I just didn't know what to do with it. The room grew quiet again, not uncomfortable, but full, like we were both sitting in a memory we'd never dared to speak about until now. I think I carried that guilt for years, he admitted. I thought if I was better, kinder, more successful, you'd find joy again. And when I moved out, I guess I thought distance would make it easier, but it didn't. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. I hadn't expected this kind of confession, this raw honesty from him, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what it was unraveling in me. You've always been enough, Jake, I whispered. You were never the reason I was hurting. Life just wears you down sometimes. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. The gesture was simple, but the warmth of it spread through me like sunlight. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat there, our hands joined, the ticking of the kitchen clock filling the space. When I finally pulled away, I stood and walked to the sink, needing something to do. I think I stopped believing I was allowed to want more, I said quietly. Not things, not a bigger life, just to be seen. To be held in someone's heart like I mattered again. I heard him rise from his chair. He came up behind me, but didn't touch me this time. His voice was close, and it wrapped around me gently. You matter to me, always have. I turned then, slowly, our eyes meeting in that fragile space between memory and something new. There was no confusion in his gaze, just truth, just presence. I don't know what this is, I said honestly. Neither do I, he replied. But I know I'm here, and I'm not afraid to feel anymore. I should have stepped back. I should have changed the subject or found some clever way to diffuse the moment. But instead, I just stood there, letting the truth of it settle around us like soft dust in sunlight. Something was blooming, quietly, carefully, and for the first time in years, I didn't want to run from it. The next few days moved like a dream. Soft around the edges, filled with moments I didn't quite know how to name. We didn't talk directly about what had passed between us in the kitchen. We didn't need to. It hung there in the air, delicate and unspoken, like a thread stretched between two people too afraid to tug at it, but unable to ignore its presence. Jake stayed longer than planned. He extended his visit under the excuse that his building wasn't ready yet, but I knew better. And maybe I was guilty, too, for not questioning it. For letting myself enjoy having him near. The sound of his footsteps in the hall, the way he lingered over morning coffee, the casual way he'd rest his hand on my shoulder as he passed behind me in the narrow hallway. It was all so small, but it was changing me in ways I hadn't expected. One evening after dinner, I poured us each a glass of wine and suggested we sit out on the back porch. The air was cool and quiet, the sky painted with streaks of fading pink. I wrapped myself in a light throw blanket, and Jake sat close beside me on the bench swing, his knee barely brushing mine. We rocked slowly in silence, listening to the cicadas buzz in the distance. Do you ever miss him? He asked, his voice low. Your father? I paused, then nodded. Sometimes. But not in the way you think. I missed the idea of what I thought we were building. Not the man himself. He nodded slowly, swirling the wine in his glass. I used to wonder what it would have been like if he'd stayed, if we'd been a normal family. We were a family, I said. Maybe not the kind you saw on TV, but we had our own shape, our own rhythm. He looked over at me, his eyes soft and searching. I always felt safe with you. My chest tightened. That's all I ever wanted. There was a long pause filled only by the gentle creak of the swing. Then he said something that made me catch my breath. And now I want you to feel that way, too. I turned to him, unsure what he meant. But when I looked into his face, I saw it again. That quiet intensity that I had been pretending not to feel. The tenderness, the the understanding. He wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't just a mother trying to keep things from falling apart. "I do feel safe," I said, my voice nearly a whisper. "With you, I feel seen." He reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered at my temple, tracing the edge of my jaw so delicately, I felt it in my chest. My breath hitched. "I don't want to cross a line," he said. "I also don't want to keep pretending I don't feel something." A part of me wanted to stop him, to remind us both of the boundaries that had always been there, but another part, quiet, buried, and long neglected, rose to the surface. The part of me that remembered what it was like to be wanted, to be touched with care, not obligation, to be chosen, not just needed. "Jake," I began, but my voice faltered. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. The warmth of his breath brushed my cheek before I felt the lightest kiss. Soft, tentative, barely there, but real. When he pulled back, he looked at me with something close to fear in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't be," I interrupted, surprising myself. The truth was, I wasn't sure what this was or what it meant, or where it could possibly go. But for the first time in years, I felt alive in a way I hadn't expected to feel again. Not confused, not reckless, just alive. We sat there in silence for a while, the weight of the moment settling around us, and somehow it didn't feel wrong. It felt honest, painfully honest. The moon rose slowly over the trees, and the cool air curled around us. I rested my head on his shoulder, and he didn't move. He just let me be there, quiet and still. Maybe nothing more would come of it. Maybe this was just a moment suspended in time, never to be repeated. But part of me knew the ground beneath my feet had shifted, and no matter what happened next, I would never quite be the same. The next morning was bathed in golden light, the kind of soft, forgiving light that makes everything feel a little less complicated than it is. I stood in the kitchen in my robe, pouring coffee, the smell filling the room like an old song. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was anything but still. I had barely slept. All night I replayed the feeling of Jake's lips grazing mine, the weight of his words, the way my heart had leaped and folded in on itself, all at once. It wasn't guilt that kept me awake. It wasn't shame either. It was something far more confusing. Clarity. The realization that life is full of lines we draw, rules we follow because we're told to. But what no one ever tells you is how blurry those lines become when emotions don't listen. When hearts don't follow the same path as reason. Jake came in just after 9, his hair damp from a shower, a worn hoodie hanging loose from his shoulders. He looked tired too, but calm, like he'd already had his own long conversation with the night. "Morning," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "Morning," I replied, handing him a mug. We stood there for a moment, sipping quietly, letting the steam fill the silence. The clink of a spoon in the sink, the ticking of the wall clock. Everything felt louder in the stillness. "I think we should talk," I said finally, setting my cup down. He nodded. "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, sunlight falling across the wood like honey. I looked at him. Not the boy I raised, not the man I kept at arm's length out of duty, but the person who had seen me in a way no one had in years. "I need you to understand something," I began. "What happened between us, that moment on the porch, it wasn't wrong. Not in a way people think. But it was unexpected, and it means something whether we act on it again or not." Jake nodded slowly. "I don't want to hurt you or confuse you. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel something real. Something I don't feel anywhere else." A tear slipped down my cheek. It's been so long since someone looked at me like I was more than just the woman who does the laundry. who makes the meals, who disappears when no one needs her. He reached across the table again, just like he had that day, and took my hand. You're not invisible to me. You never have been. We sat in that truth for a long time. No rush, no need to define it. Just two people acknowledging something that had surfaced between them. Not out of desire alone, but out of years of closeness, of emotional depth, of unspoken connection. Eventually, I spoke. You're going back to your place tomorrow, aren't you? He nodded. Yeah, they finished the repairs. It's time. I gave a small smile. Good. You need to go back. We both do, but that doesn't mean this was meaningless. He said quickly, holding my gaze. It just means we let it be what it was. I nodded. A moment of truth, of connection, and that's okay. Later that day, we packed up his things. I folded his shirts like I always had. Only this time, I did it slowly, with intention, with memory. When he hugged me at the door, he held on a little longer than usual. I'll call, he said. I know, I replied, my hand brushing his cheek one last time. As I watched him drive away, something